Today we're going to talk about Mars, the red planet, and we're going to start out with a quick brain pop.
Dear Tim and Moby, what's a Martian? From Bean. Yeah, a lot of you have been asking if Moby's a Martian. A Martian is someone or something that comes from the planet Mars, the fourth planet from the Sun. Moby doesn't come from Mars. Actually, he's from... Moving on. Mars is known as the red planet because of its reddish, iron-rich soil. It has two moons, Phobos and Deimos, which are probably captured asteroids from the nearby asteroid belt. Out of all of the planets in our solar system, Mars is probably the most similar to Earth. It's only about half the size of our planet, but Mars has seasons, polar ice caps, volcanoes, and windstorms just like Earth. The Martian day is 24 hours and 37 minutes long, almost exactly as long as an Earth day. That's right, Moby, Mars has water, but not like you'd find on the Earth. Yeah, that does look like a dry riverbed. In fact, when humans first saw those formations, they called them canals. People imagined a planet much like Earth with flowing water and trees and flowers and maybe even a civilization of Martians. But the truth is, Mars is a cold, dry desert. The average surface temperature on Mars is about minus 55 degrees Celsius, but these temperatures can range anywhere from minus 133 degrees Celsius at the poles in winter to almost 27 degrees Celsius on the day side in summer. It has a thin atmosphere made of 95% carbon dioxide with trace amounts of other gases like nitrogen, argon, oxygen, and water vapor. Just over 0.1% of the atmosphere is oxygen, so you and I wouldn't be able to breathe there. And that water we were talking about? It's frozen up in the polar ice caps and possibly under the surface and in vapor form in the atmosphere. Well, that's the thing. There's a lot of evidence to suggest that liquid water did flow across the Martian surface at one point. There's those riverbed-like formations, sediments that look like they were deposited by running water, and even plains that might have once held oceans. And recent satellite photos suggest that even today, small gullies are being formed by small amounts of water trickling out of the ground. While all of these formations could have been created by some other natural process, one of the most popular explanations is that Mars used to have a lot of water on it. The question is, what happened to it all? Why did the climate on Mars change so drastically? It's a real mystery. Yes, it is a real mystery. Hopefully one that both current and planned missions to the Red Planet will be able to solve. You do not know what happened to all the water. I'm ignoring you.
Let's take a look at a few fast facts about Mars. First of all, the diameter is about half of the Earth's diameter. So when you try to think about how big Mars is, just imagine it as being about half the size of the Earth. It has a very, very thin atmosphere, which is mostly carbon dioxide. And its day is just about 24 hours, just about the same length of day as the Earth has. Also like the Earth, its axis is tilted. Now remember, the Earth's axis is tilted about 23.5 degrees, and Mars's is tilted 25 degrees. And since the tilt of the Earth causes seasons, that tells us that Mars experiences seasons as well. There are no tectonic plates on Mars, but we do see evidence of past volcanic activity, but none presently. Early observers of Mars, like Schiaparelli and Lowell, believed that they thought they saw canals on Mars. And canals are man-made, so they thought that maybe there were some life forms on Mars that were building these. They also saw these growing and shrinking ice caps, which they thought maybe had something to do with life forms. And so this led to a lot of sci-fi tales. The atmosphere of Mars is 95% carbon dioxide, and it's very, very thin. The atmospheric pressure is only about 1% of Earth's pressure. So besides the fact that there's no breathable oxygen there, also the lack of air pressure would really affect any people that were trying to land on Mars. And here in this picture you can see a very faint haze covering the planet. Occasionally we see a dust storm, very, very large-scale dust storms on the surface of Mars, and sometimes they even cover the entire planet. So here we can see one here on July 2nd, and you can see it grow until it's a pretty large dust storm a couple of days later. Here's another picture of one. Most of the oxygen that's on Mars is bound up in the rocks, which is why they appear to be that reddish color. One question that scientists have about Mars is what has produced the atmosphere that's there. And scientists think possibly that it was produced through outgassing. So that, again, leads us to the possibility of there being oceans covering the surface of Mars at some point. And so here's an artist's picture of what it might have possibly looked like at some time in the past with an oceans covering the surface. But because of Mars' smaller size, it's lost most of its lighter gases. It doesn't have enough mass to hold on to those heavier gases, lighter gases. Gases that are bound up in the polar cap are returned to the atmosphere each spring in something called spots and fans. So here's an artist's rendering of what that might look like. So as the polar cap is finally exposed to the sun after a long winter, a lot of that ends up evaporating and producing these interesting features here. And here we see an actual picture of what they look like when you're looking down at the surface. Now let's take a look at the geology of Mars. Mars has giant volcanoes like we see right here, long, very deep valleys, and impact craters. Also, we see wide expanses, wide deserts of broken rock. And these are the features that tend to dominate Mars. The northern lowlands are areas that are pretty free of craters, and because of this lack of craters, it tells us that this surface was probably resurfaced a few billion years ago. And possibly this would be the area that was once filled with water. The southern highlands, on the other hand, are very heavily cratered. So this is probably a pretty old surface, possibly 2 to 3 billion years old. Volcanoes on Mars. All volcanoes on Mars are shield volcanoes. And we've already talked about the fact that on any other planetary body in the solar system, we only see shield volcanoes. It's only on Earth that we see other types of volcanoes caused from plate tectonics. So, an important volcano for you to know about on Mars is Olympus Mons. This is the highest and largest volcano in the entire solar system. And so up here we see a picture of Mauna Loa in Hawaii, and above it there we see the size of Olympus Mons. So you can see it's much, much larger. The Tharsis size is this region over here where we see the 3 volcanoes right here. And it rises, the entire rise is about 10 kilometers above the surface, so it's pretty high elevation. And rising magma has repeatedly broken through the crust to form volcanoes. So a lot of times when you look at pictures of Mars, you're able to see these 3 volcanoes pretty easily. So we've had some rovers that have explored the surface of Mars pretty close up, and some of those recent ones are Spirit and Opportunity. These landed in 2004. Spirit is dead, it's not working anymore, but Opportunity is still alive and collecting data. Also the Phoenix Mars lander, which landed in 2008. And currently we have the Mars Science Lab, also known as Curiosity. They're presently doing quite a bit of laboratory work on the surface. So we're going to hear a little more about Curiosity.
The hope is that we land there and we can basically unlock the secrets of an environment that existed a few billion years ago on Mars that was potentially a place that life could have survived.
Mars has beckoned to Earthbound observers for centuries, seeming to appeal to astronomers to find out the secrets of the lone bright red dot among all the bright white stars in the nighttime sky. Those answers came sparingly, but as technology advanced on Earth, astronomers were provided new tools to get better and better looks at the planet closest to Earth in terms of distance and makeup. NASA put a wheeled robot on Mars for the first time in July 1997. About the size of a skateboard and weighing 23 pounds, the Sojourner showed Earth unprecedented views of the red planet as it rolled over the surface for 3 months, all within 500 meters of its base station. Now, NASA is on the verge of launching another rover to Earth's nearest planetary neighbor, one that is nearly 1,000 times heavier than Sojourner, and packing a mobile laboratory designed to look closely at what the planet is made of. The rover is called the Mars Science Laboratory, or MSL. It's also known as Curiosity, and its results may answer one of the great questions of modern science.
Mars and Earth were made at about the same time, and yet they've had very different evolutionary pathways. We seem to be verdant and full of life, and Mars is quite cryptic. So we'd like to understand a little bit about the past of Mars. In fact, we'd specifically like to know whether or not Mars has ever been habitable, perhaps in some distant time, perhaps now beneath the surface.
So one question you might have is, why is Curiosity looking for organics on Mars? So let's take a quick little look at why that might be.
Why is Curiosity looking for organics? Organics are carbon-based molecules, key ingredients to life. If Curiosity finds organics in ancient rocks, there's a better chance Mars once had good conditions for small life forms called microbes. But finding organics is hard. That's because organics easily break down when exposed to harsh things like extreme radiation and chemical oxidants that gave the Martian surface its rusty color. A great place to look for ancient organics today is in rock layers. Organics that were quickly trapped and buried in layers of mud or in sediments that sank to the bottom of a body of water could have an especially good chance of being preserved. Scientists think Curiosity's landing site, Gale Crater, contains those special layers, created in ancient times when water was present. The water dried up long ago, but rock layers that remain today could still preserve organics inside. If Curiosity finds organics, it wouldn't prove life existed, but it sure would improve the odds that Mars once had the right ingredients for life.
So let's talk about water on Mars. Why isn't there any liquid water on the surface at present? Well, that's because it would evaporate due to that low air pressure that we were talking about. Remember that it has a very, very thin atmosphere, which results in a low surface pressure, and so liquid water is not able to exist on the surface because of that. But there is evidence for liquid water in Mars's past. And we see that evidence in outflow channels that look like they're from sudden massive floods at some point in its history. We see some collapsed structures after the withdrawal of subsurface water, and also lots of different valleys resembling meandering riverbeds. Here we see a picture of something called hematite, which are concretions that are in rocks that form in a water-type environment. And we also see lots of sedimentary rock layers. So these things all tell us that there was probably liquid water at once in its past. The last thing we're going to talk about are the moons of Mars. So far, as we've learned about the terrestrial planets, the only planet that seems to have any moons is the Earth. Well, once we get out to Mars, we see that there is another terrestrial planet with some moons. But these moons look very, very different than the Earth's moon. Mars has two very small moons called Phobos and Deimos. These are too small to pull themselves into a spherical shape, so they look like maybe captured asteroids. So here's a picture of Phobos, and they are also dark gray, very low density, probably captured from the asteroid belt, and here's a picture of Deimos. So that's it for our video on Mars. Hopefully this has given you some new information and a few things to think about.